Missouri's got a big gap between the urban and rural areas. In one town, you'll see rednecks who shoot fireworks off down the river. And then one town over is all meth heads who can't seem to get their lives in order. And then 10 miles down the road is a big city. It's a really pretty state with a lot of big sunsets and lots of really pretty forests. Small cities are shrinking, big cities are growing. It's just sort of average here. Okay, so we learned a lot about Missouri in the previous video I did when I unboxed the state. We learned that the northern part of the state's mostly corn, the central part's a lot of woods, and the bottom part has a lot of poor small towns and drugs. We also learned about St. Louis and Kansas City. Basically, in St. Louis, the bad part of town is here, and the rich people live here, and the nice areas in Kansas City are on the southern side here. But there's a lot more to Missouri than just that. There's history and facts and issues impacting the state of Missouri that we didn't even talk about. So that's what we're going to do today. Kind of pick up from where we left off from the last video. And talk about some history and facts and even meet people who live in Missouri and hear what they have to say about their state. So get ready for Cornerhouse Tales, Missouri, the Redneck State. Missouri Tales. Not Missouri Tales. There is a lot to talk about Missouri. Now it's time for Missouri Facts, everyone.
I like learning about facts.
Okay, so everybody knows Missouri is the show me state. But the reason is because way back in 1897, a congressman said, "I'm from a state that raises corn and cotton and cockleburs and Democrats, and frothy eloquence neither convinces or satisfies me. I'm from Missouri. You have to show me." And so the nickname stuck. That's pretty interesting. And clearly, people way back in 1897 spoke way more eloquently than they do today. Samuel Clemens, aka Mark Twain, was born in Florida, Missouri, which is interesting because people say Missouri is the Florida of the Midwest. He went on to write many childhood classics based on his time spent in Missouri. Other authors from Missouri include T.S. Eliot, Maya Angelou, Tennessee Williams, and Sarah Teasdale, whoever that is. St. Louis might be one of the worst cities in the U.S. for murders, but if you stay out of the bad areas on the north end of town, you'll be okay. Now, if you vacation here or you moved here, you'd be happy to know St. Louis has more free major visitor attractions than just about anywhere outside of D.C. That's cool. Missouri's a show-me state, but it's also the cave state. That's because there's more than 6,000 caves here. One cave has a restaurant inside. That doesn't sound healthy because, bat poop. And if you want to get married underground, there's something called the Bridal Cave in Camdenton. There's been 2,000 weddings held here, people. Seems kind of weird. The 1904 World's Fair in St. Louis was home to many culinary inventions. The waffle cone, cotton candy, iced tea, and Dr. Pepper were all first served to people in the St. Louis World's Fair in 1904. And that's pretty much still the diet for many people in Missouri. You also might find it interesting that as part of the World's Fair, St. Louis also hosted the 1904 Summer Olympics at the same time and at the same place. It was the first time the Olympics was held outside of Europe. It was a disaster. Only 12 countries actually came. So, of course, we took most of the medals. I guess we'll take it. Tug-of-war was an event, if you can believe it or not. And the potato sack race? Seriously? Those events are no longer part of the Olympics, and you can see why. Of course, earthquakes aren't just for California. Come on now. 4 of the largest earthquakes ever in North America were here in Missouri. They all happened in 1811 and 1812 in New Madrid, Missouri. Apparently, the Missouri River ran backwards during this time. Missouri has the largest beer-producing plant in the country, the Anheuser-Busch plant in St. Louis. You knew that. They pump out 11 billion bottles of beer every year, enough for Americans to drink 33 bottles every year. Of course, kids don't drink beer, so that means more beer for adults. It is not a fact that all Missouri towns look like this, but it's kind of a fact. This is basically what any small town in Missouri looks like, people. Now, you've heard of the Pony Express, right? It was a mail service that took packages across the country in 1860. At the time, this was the fastest way to get messages across the country. Using ponies, you can get something from the East Coast to California in 10 days. Well, the Pony Express route began here in St. Joseph, Missouri. and went all the way to California. But the company went bankrupt after 18 months, and then we started using telegraphs, so no more Pony Express. The Lake of the Ozarks is a modern marvel. This is where all the unvaccinated kids party on boats, but it has more miles of shoreline than the coast of California. Kansas City, Missouri has more fountains than any other city in the world except for Rome. The fountains here were originally built for horses, birds, and dogs to drink out of. That's cool. Everybody knows about the St. Louis Arch. Did you know it's as tall as it is wide? You didn't. Missouri's tied with Tennessee. For most states, they border. Each state borders 8 other states, and you probably didn't know that, or maybe you did. The first monster truck ever came from Hazelwood, Missouri. It was called Bigfoot, and now every dude in Missouri under the age of 25 thinks he's driving Bigfoot. He is not. You may not know it, but Walt Disney developed his love for drawing in Little Marceline, Missouri when he was a kid. And Mort Walker, the guy that created Beetle Bailey, he went to school at the University of Missouri. Lots of drawers are from Missouri. I didn't know that.
Did you know they made Voltron here?
Voltron? The cartoon? I thought that thing was made in Japan. Well, that makes Missouri extra cool. I loved Voltron growing up. I didn't know they made that in Missouri. You know what else that time means? It's time for Missouri trivia. Let's call some people from Missouri and see if they can answer some tough Missouri questions.
I like trivia time.
So, I do this new thing where I talk to people about their state, and then I have 5 trivia questions that I ask to see if you can answer them. You're a very smart guy, so I think maybe you'll do pretty good.
I'm really bad at trivia. I'm going to let you know right now. I am.
Oh, it's like facts about your state that you'll probably get most of them. All right. Okay, so you know about the big earthquake that happened in 1811 that rocked your state pretty hard. What's the name of that fault line?
Oh, it's the New Madrid.
That is. Yes. Do you worry about that? Do you worry about earthquake? Do people still talk about that today? Or are they oh, that was 100, 200 years ago?
People talk about it in the sense of oh, we're near a fault line. It's down in the southeastern part of the state. It's closer to Memphis than it is here. But they're oh, there's earthquakes. You know how many old buildings there are in St. Louis that aren't up to code? Maybe I worry about it a little bit.
In Missouri, there's in 1811, there was a big giant earthquake. Have you heard about that earthquake?
Oh, yes. It happened in New Madrid, I believe.
Okay. Well, that was going to be the question. What's the name of the fault line?
The fault line? I have no idea. All I knew is it happened in New Madrid.
Okay. Well, what do you think the fault line would be called if it's in New Madrid?
New Madrid, I think it was called let's say the fault line, earthquake, I believe.
I think it's called the New Madrid fault line.
Oh, yeah, New Madrid. I think it's the New Madrid earthquake.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, question 2. What year did St. Louis host the Olympics?
Oh, that was 1904.
It was 1904.
Same year as the World Fair.
It was. And apparently it was a disaster. They tried to merge the two, and it didn't go very well.
It was terrible. If anyone has some time, make sure you look up that 1904, I think, what was it? It was a marathon. At worst marathon ever operated in the history of the Olympics. It has to be.
Yeah, it was hot and humid. But I guess people were cheating. They were getting in cars and driving 10 miles and getting out. Or did they have cars in 1904?
Yeah,
I feel I read.
I think so. What I read and have seen, wasn't there, can't verify this, but 1904, there was one guy who stopped because he had a cramp or something. And then they put him in a car. They were going to take him to the end. And he said, "You can stop me here." And he ran to the finish line. And then he claimed he was a victor, and he wasn't. Another, 2 guys got chased who were they were expected to win. They're from somewhere in Africa. Got chased by wild dogs, off the course. One dude took a nap after stealing some peaches, and he finished in 4th. It was stupid.
I don't think St. Louis is going to get the Olympics again. Let's just say that.
Yeah, I don't know if they deserve it after that one.
What year did St. Louis host the Olympics?
The Olympics, I believe it was like at least 2005 or at least 2006.
No, that was not. It was actually 1904.
Oh, 1904, the World's Fair.
Yeah. All right, you're doing pretty good. You're 2 for 2. So clearly, St. Louis is up against the Mississippi River. What's the longest river in the country?
It's got to be in the Mississippi, isn't it? Or am I wrong? I think I'm wrong. I don't think it is the Mississippi. In the United States, you said?
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna go Mississippi, but I don't think that's right. Might be the Missouri.
It's the Missouri.
I knew because they coincide and it goes way west. Dang it! I did.
It goes really far. Yeah. So you're 0 for 2. Let's try this one here. Okay, so St. Louis lies along the Mississippi River.
Yes.
What's the longest river in the country?
The longest river in the country would be the Missouri River.
Yes, that's right. Good job.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah. All right. Have you been on the Missouri River before?
Oh yes, I have. Been to St. Charles, where the Missouri River is at, and I had actually been to the confluence of the Missouri and Mississippi when we were like in Alton.
Okay. Okay, so you missed one, so you're 2 out of 3 so far. You should be able to get this one, maybe not. So St. Louis people consume more what than any other city in the country?
There's a couple things that I think this go for, but I think the answer is barbecue sauce.
It is barbecue sauce.
Yep, I knew that one. That's something I've heard before.
Yeah, it's not crack. It's barbecue sauce.
Right. It's not bullets. It's definitely barbecue sauce.
So like what's your favorite way if someone is going to come to St. Louis, they haven't experienced the Missouri barbecue thing. What's your favorite barbecue sauce? What's your favorite way to do it? And where's the best place to go in St. Louis?
I'm a sweet guy. I like a sweet barbecue sauce. So if you're a big Carolina sauce guy, and it's not a mustard sauce, I'm not about it. There are a couple different places you can go. There are some chains like people hear of like Salt and Smoke is big here, and Pappy's is good, but there are small ones, smaller places like hole in the wall types that are going to give you better ones. I really like Smoking Barrels barbecue, and then there's also a place called Adams the barbecue is really good. Okay, so it's Bogart's is a big one, Salt and Smoke, Pappy's, and Sugar Fire. Those are like the 4 that most people talk about.
Cool. Hopefully, if you walk into one of those places, they give you a free sandwich for plugging them.
Yeah, you better. I'd like it.
All right, so you got 1 out of 3 so far. So here's a question that's do you live in St. Louis? No, you live
in Oakville.
Oakdale. How far is that from St. Louis?
It's actually not too far. I just take Telegraph Road, then once you get down, to Lime, it becomes from Telegraph to Broadway. You head to, through, Lime, which is a little rundown. Then you drive all the way down to Broadway. You'll just keep going down further until you see, the Budweiser, and you'll see downtown St. Louis from there.
Okay, that was pretty specific. So you're sort of close to St. Louis.
Yes.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. Okay, so people in St. Louis eat the most of one thing more than anybody else in the country. What does St. Louis eat more of than anybody else?
More. My guess is probably Ted Drew's.
What did you call it?
Ted Drew's, ice cream?
No, it's not ice cream.
Oh, it's not? Okay.
No.
I believe it's probably like, some Emo's Pizza, I believe.
No.
Oh.
It's barbecue sauce.
Oh, barbecue, like Kansas City barbecue.
Yeah. Well, just barbecue sauce.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you didn't get that one. All right. So last question. Anheuser-Busch produces the most beer in the world. I think, right? The world, country, world.
Supposed to produce a lot of beer.
What's our most popular brand of beer that comes out of that factory that people drink the most of?
Most popular brand.
Or most popular beer?
Yeah, I'm gonna say Bud Light, but I'm not confident in that answer.
It is Bud Light. Yeah.
Dang, and I even knew the Missouri one too. I was almost 5 for 5.
Yeah, you should. I think I'd give you 4.5 because you kind of said both, but like you.
I didn't commit, but I said it might be Missouri because I thought it was a trick question, but I was so bullish on that Missouri or Mississippi. That's okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'm proud of myself.
What's the best-selling brand of beer that they make at that plant in St. Louis? Which beer sells the most?
I believe it's the Bud Light.
Yeah, it is the Bud Light. Yeah.
And I drink Bud Light as well, so.
All right. Well, apparently they make like 70 billion bottles of it or whatever a year. And like each person could drink like 30 bottles, but that includes kids. So you're helping set the record for Bud Light if you're drinking a lot of Bud Light.
Oh, yes.
What's your favorite beer to drink?
Yeah, and my coworker Ron, he loves Bud Light. In fact, he actually drinks a Bud Light again after he gets home from work every day.
Yeah. And now it's time for the history of Missouri in 3 minutes or less. A long time ago, Missouri wasn't all anti-vaxxers, meth heads, rednecks, and old farmers. No, they were all Native Americans. One of these tribes was called the Sioux, but the French called them the Missouri, or people of the wooden canoes. That's how the state got its name. The French were the first Europeans to set foot in Missouri in 1673 when they pulled over after a long journey on the mighty Mississippi. And then 10 years later, France claimed the entire region. They were like, we got here first. They called it the Louisiana Territory. It was pretty big. The first settlement in Missouri was in St. Genevieve in 1731. St. Louis followed in 1764. Spain and France fought over this mysterious Missouri land for a long time. France controlled it for a long time, then Spain took over, and then by the year 1800, France had it again. But then in 1803, the US offered the leader of France, Napoleon, $15 million for the whole kitty. He actually said yes, and the deal was called the Louisiana Purchase. This acquisition doubled the size of the United States. Haha, suckers, that's like 3 cents an acre. A year after we bought Missouri, Thomas Jefferson, the president, was like, I need 2 explorers to go check out this new land we just bought. Who wants to go? And 2 guys, Meriwether Lewis and William Clark, were like, we'll do it. So they left St. Louis on the Missouri River and headed west, and wound up making it all the way to the Pacific Ocean in present-day Oregon. They got lots of bug bites. Later in 1849, gold was discovered in California, and the Missouri towns like St. Louis, Independence, Westport, and St. Joseph became points of departure for people seeking gold. That's why Missouri became known as the Gateway to the West. But things were getting interesting here because of slavery. See, a bunch of states allowed slavery, and a bunch of states did not allow slavery. Maine wanted to be a state, but they didn't want slavery. Missouri wanted to be a state too, and they liked slaves. So to keep the balance between free and slave states, the U.S. government passed the Missouri Compromise. Maine and Missouri both became states in 1821. And part of that meant there could be no slavery north of Missouri, except for Missouri itself. And that decision led to tons of fighting between free Kansas and the slave state of Missouri. That's one reason Missouri and Kansas don't like each other still to this day. Well, the Missouri Compromise didn't last long, because in 1857, here came a guy named Dred Scott. He was a Missouri slave who was taken from Missouri into Illinois. Then he came back to Missouri and he was like, I should be free now. So he sued in court for his freedom. Well, that backfired. In 1857, the Supreme Court ruled that Dred Scott was still a slave. And in fact, now that you bring it up, the Constitution never really said anything about people of African descent being citizens. So actually, you can't sue because you're not a citizen. And while we're at it, the whole Missouri Compromise thing is unconstitutional. Slavery can be allowed wherever states say they want it. Well, that pissed off a lot of people. Eventually, as you know, the North and South went to battle over slavery, a war which lasted 4 years. Eventually, the Union won and slaves were set free. Missouri would be the first state to free its slaves. Since the end of the Civil War, there's been many famous people and events in Missouri. Jesse James was a bank robber. He ran around Missouri, drinking and wooing women. They couldn't catch him, and he had a $10,000 bounty on his head. He finally got killed by a bounty hunter in 1882 in St. Joseph. Charles Lindbergh was a pilot. He wanted to fly a plane across the Atlantic Ocean. In 1927, he did just that after getting a $29,000 loan from 2 St. Louis businessmen to pay for the flight. That's why the plane was called the Spirit of St. Louis. And there's been one U.S. president from Missouri. It was Harry Truman. He was a Missouri farm boy. He became our president in 1945 and served 2 terms. When he retired to his hometown of Independence, Missouri, he led a simple life, making do with his monthly Army pension of $112.56. But apparently Harry Truman conned us all. He wasn't poor and pretended to be poor to get the government to pass the Former Presidents Act so he would get more money. I guess former presidents deserve a good annual pay. I mean, we hand out welfare to everybody who wants it, and they did nothing to earn it. And that really happened.
It's time for Missouri News. I'm Skip Fritzman.
Thanks, Skip. There's all kinds of interesting news coming out of Missouri that you should know about, and some stuff that'll just clutter your brain. You know, stuff like when the Kansas City police opened fire at a lawn ornament thinking it was an alligator. So in the Kansas City suburb of Independence, a guy was trying to keep kids off his lawn, so he put a fake alligator in his yard. Well, that backfired because a neighbor called the cops, and the KCPD showed up, guns a-blazing. They actually shot the fake alligator twice before realizing it was a lawn ornament. Actually, Missouri has a lot of alligator stories, you know, since it's a redneck state and all. For this one, we're going to go to Wildwood, Missouri, on the western edge of St. Louis. Here, some dudes were tromping around their backyard when they saw an alligator in a creek behind their house. Well, there aren't too many gators in these parts, so they did what any Missouri redneck would do. They captured it. I just rigged up a noose. It took us about 3 hours because he kept outsmarting us. I said, we got to get him out. So we did. It was fun, actually. Look at that. Some Missouri rednecks getting outsmarted by an alligator. Well, it turned out the alligator was a neighbor's pet. He lived 2 miles away, and he'd been missing for 2 weeks. The gator's name is Fluffy. No kidding. Apparently, owning a gator in Missouri is legal as long as it's registered with the health department. So the neighbor got his pet gator, Fluffy, back. But while letting your gator out of your yard in Missouri is okay, letting your hog out is not okay. The state of Missouri just signed a new bill which says if your swine gets out of your yard, you get a Class E felony, which means almost 10 years in prison and a $2,000 fine. What the? Apparently, hogs are a big nuisance in Missouri because they reproduce fast and cause damage to farms. There's about 50,000 wild hogs roaming around this state as of this writing, and many are just eating dinner. Poor pigs. And on a more serious note, we know how states have been battling with COVID. Well, Missouri is one of the least vaccinated states of all. Folks there are just being stubborn about getting the shot, and they don't want to wear masks either, although this Missouri man was spotted in a homemade mask at a local Casey's not too long ago. What the hell? Well, anyway, all these unvaccinated people are getting some stern lectures from their parents. At the Lake of the Ozarks, young people have been partying all summer long. There's a worry they're going to spread COVID around. They don't seem to care, though. What's COVID? One person said. An area bartender said, I'm living, breathing proof. I've not been sick one time. I've been as hands-on as you can be with people from everywhere. One other person said, do you see any masks here in Missouri? Not one. Is anybody getting sick? No. They're full of shit. Well, if that doesn't sum up Missouri for you, I don't know what will. And that's a lot of stuff about Missouri. Goodbye. Missouri Tales. Not Missouri Tales. There is a lot to talk about Missouri. Hey guys, if you learned something new about America or what it's like to live in America, great. You should think about subscribing and turning on your notifications. You can also click one of these videos or playlists for more. You can also now buy my songs on iTunes and other formats. Click the link in the description. Thanks for watching. And remember, while we all might have different views, we should all be nice to each other and try to make the U.S. a better place in a positive way.
This is Sage, Nick's manager. This has been a Cornerhouse Entertainment production.
And are you looking to move and need advice? I do consulting. That's right. I'll sit down and talk about where the next perfect place for you and your family should be. I do it all the time. Together, let's find you a new home that's safe and checks all your boxes. You can get my email in the description to find out how I can help you find your perfect relocation. And I can also help you find your new house, too. Email me and I'll work with you on not just helping you figure out where to move, but I can help you find your perfect home too. That's right. Someone's a realtor now. Who wants to deal with a realtor they don't know when you can have me help you, right?
The crime rate's really high, and that gets attributed to the entire area. But to really talk about how bad that one area is, if you were to isolate just the northern half of the city, it would be undeniably the worst murder rate in the entire world. There is no doubt in my mind. Because, like, let's say last year we had 250 murders or something. It was probably close to that. It was probably 240. Maybe 190 came from the northern half of the city where there's less people. I mean, by a lot less people. So most of the city's pretty safe, but those areas that are bad they're horrible. And there needs to, a lot needs to be done to help people out and make sure that's not the case. I had to do a whole canvassing thing there for where I was doing my internship, and I mean, if we had to go door to door in a whole neighborhood, and it's like, okay, well, there's one door, now I gotta walk 2 blocks to get to another door. I mean, it looks like you're in rural America in some parts of it, seriously, because so many houses have been demolished.
Yeah. So since we're on the subject, I wanted to talk about this later. St. Louis, you seem to know St. Louis more, probably better than probably anybody I've ever talked to. What's going on in St. Louis right now? What are the pros and cons of living there? And if somebody was going to move there, what should they expect in today's St. Louis climate?
I'll talk about pros because I'm a very pro St. Louis guy. I love St. Louis for the history. It's got a good culture. I think it gets overlooked in a lot of different ways because it used to be really big and now it's not as big. It's roughly the size of Pittsburgh when it used to have a bigger population than like Atlanta does right now. But it's got a good food scene. It's got great sports, despite the whole Rams thing, which that is a sore subject for everybody in the city still, and it's been like 6 years. Good natural climate. If you're wanting to do something like in nature, let's say you're like, well, I don't like cities, I like nature. The region's got a lot of that. In Missouri, we have mountains. Now it's not like the Rockies. There's obviously the river. There are hiking trails. There's mountains. I love all that. Now for the bad. You live in Missouri, and Missouri politics are stupid. And I'm not just saying like from being partisan. I'm saying that a lot of politicians that are in Missouri I don't know if they think things through a lot. And I'm going to be transparent. I'm, a progressive-ish person, but in St. Louis, there are a lot of progressive politics that are more on like, there's a lot of spite politics, a lot of like, I don't like you, and we're just going to do whatever because I don't like you. And there's a lot of headaches that come with that.
If there's an issue that Missouri is going to be dealing with, in the next 10 years, or I don't know, like what's something that's on your radar in terms of things that your state needs to think about?
Because Missouri, I feel like, is lagging in a lot of different metrics. We're losing a lot of big companies. They're moving to other places. Centene's thinking about moving out of Missouri and going to North Carolina. They're a Fortune 500 company. So just getting things under control and doing better in the long run to have a shared vision of what Missouri can be and how to get there. But we're not there yet. We've got a lot of skeletons in our closet that we need to clean out before we can get to there.
Yeah. So would you recommend people come to Missouri to bring their family and expect to get a good job and love it?
I think that's so hard for me to answer because I think people could come in and there's a lot to love. That's what I say. I think there's a lot to love in Missouri. I think it is an underrated state from its opportunities and what nature and and culture. But there's so many issues that come alongside of it. If you had to come here, you said like, oh, but I got a job opportunity in like Charlotte in North Carolina. Well, I don't think there's as many issues in North Carolina as there is in Missouri. So it's one of the things of like, well, yeah, if you're going to play the long game and just hope that things, kind of stabilize, cool, dope, awesome, you're good to go. But if you're talking like, I've got kids and I don't know if, one day are they going to take money away from the school system so we can give it to charter schools, that you don't want to have to worry about that. It's going to be stable somewhere else. So would I recommend it? Maybe, but I can't say that very confidently that I would be like, yeah, for sure.
And you're a lifetime Missouri guy too.
Yeah, I've been here my whole life, and I really intend on staying in St. Louis forever. I love the city, but I can't fault somebody for saying it's just a little too not firm for me. I need someplace that's definitely going to be what I need to be for the long haul, and you can't fault somebody for that.
Yeah. What do you think about Josh Hawley? He gets a lot of heat for the way he's all the things that he's done. Is that the future of Missouri, or do you think he represents a minority in your state?
You bring up a good point that I totally forgot, and it's people who want to climb the political ladder. There's a lot of people in Missouri that are like that. There's a guy who's running for Ann Wagner's seat as a Democrat. He's not from St. Louis. He's moving from like Virginia or something so he can run for Senate here. There's a lot of people that come here, and I think the old term was carpetbagger, where they're like, I'm going to move to an area where it's going to be really easy to get a seat, and I'm going to move up the political ladder. And that's kind of how Josh Hawley is. Now, he lived in Missouri, but he doesn't even live in Missouri right now at all. He lives exclusively in Virginia, and he uses his sister's address to be in the Missouri Senate. I think that I think there's things that he gets a lot of flack for, credit for, that he doesn't deserve. Do I think that outside of that he's a bum? Yeah, I do. I don't know if I can necessarily say like he's totally responsible for everything that happened on January 6th. But I can say that he doesn't represent Missouri because he doesn't care about Missouri. He cares about himself and moving up the political ladder for himself. But do I think that some of the things he says represents Missourians? Absolutely. I think that a lot of the things that he talks about, and while he could be, maybe he doesn't even agree with it himself, but I think there's a lot of things that he says that a lot of, especially rural Missourians, would agree with. He's been on record being kind of bullish against like big businesses and being more for like the little guy, which I don't know if he believes in that, but he says it. And from that perspective, if you're going to say, I take that man at his word, I mean, even the stuff about, the former president, stuff he would say about that, a lot of Missourians were really hard on Trump. They loved Trump. So do I think he represents the future of the state? Kinda. but he doesn't respect the state.
Yeah, I get you. A lot of politicians don't anymore.
Right. No. I mean, we're about to have another senator who's just like him, and Eric Greitens, our former governor. So he's the front runner right now. So Missouri's going to be well represented, I'm sure.
So you touched on the issue of the schools might be broke, the crime in St. Louis, the political kind of infighting. You have aspiring folks that don't really care about the state. Are there any other issues that you think your state has that are worth discussing?
Other issues. I really do think those are the big. I mean, Kansas City has high gun violence too. So when you're talking about what to do, I mean, it's not even just a St. Louis thing. Like Kansas City is, I think, like third on gun deaths per capita or something. It's those are state issues by far, because it's not just a coincidence that two cities in the same state are so bad for that issue. So I mean, I think what I outlined, I think it was the biggest thing. I think it's not even close.
So give people an idea really quick on what you think of Missouri. Are you going to live there the rest of your life? Are you going to grow old and have kids in Missouri? Or are you going to get out of there?
Well, I'm planning to live in Missouri pretty much my whole life, and I eventually do want to have, a wife and some kids, might maybe one day move out to the country in St. Genevieve and have a house out there, and some little farmland. That's my goal later in life.
All right. Where would you recommend people move to in Missouri if they were going to move there? What are some good places people should move to?
Well, there's plenty of good places. Like there's Washington, Missouri. That's a very nice area. That's where my parents used to live. And there's also like Chesterfield. There's also Herman, Kirkwood. You also get Webster Groves. That's a really nice area. And also some areas like Lee Summit, St. Charles, and great places in Missouri to visit would be like Hannibal, Washington, Herman, and also Kansas City.
Mm-hmm.
And then and some pretty much another great place to visit it would be Branson. But now in St. Louis, though, I would not, in the city of St. Louis especially, I would not recommend everyone going there. It's just bad down there, just bad.
Yeah, I mean, there's some nice parts of town, right, in St. Louis?
Well, yeah, there is some, but if you go to like North St. Louis, it's definitely bad for sure. And downtown, it's okay, as long as it's not nighttime,
Mm-hmm.
Especially,
What do you think?
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, especially if you're coming from a Cardinals game, you just gotta be aware. When you're leaving the Busch Stadium, there could be some kind of criminals out there.
Mm-hmm. Where are the bad places to live in your state?
Oh, the bad places. Well, one is city of St. Louis, and then the other ones, I can say is probably like Kansas City can be another one, and also Poplar Bluff. That's a rundown area, and Kennett, Missouri. That's another rundown area, and Ferguson. Definitely stay away from Ferguson as well as Jennings. Those areas are just bad. And Kinloch, stay away from that area as well. And that's pretty much the bad parts I can think of that are bad in Missouri.
Okay. Well, that's pretty helpful.
Mm-hmm.
So what's this? Missouri gets a lot of stereotypes for being a lot of rednecks and stuff.
Yeah.
Do you guys deserve that?
Well, in some way, if you go to Jefferson County, it does kind of get a little redneck, but St. Louis County, it gets more like, more like the urban sprawl, and more the, average people walking around.
Mm-hmm.
But in northern Missouri, though, you get a lot more, farmers, plant crops, plants, cornfields, and in southern Missouri, especially the Boot Hill, you get more like the cotton fields, which is similar to like, in Arkansas or Mississippi.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go down to the Ozark region, definitely gets redneck down there. Look almost similar to Arkansas, like you said. But you do have some, Johnson shut-ins down there, where people like to go camp. They're also got, a great fishing area, like the Current River down in Salem, where my dad and I used to go fish a lot down there.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of fun. What do you think about the politics in Missouri? Are you happy with the way things are going?
Oh yeah, the politics. Missouri is a red state. No doubt. Mike Parson, he's an outstanding governor, and Josh Hawley, he's an outstanding Missouri state senator. But the one politician I don't like in Missouri is the St. Louis County Executive, Sam Page. He is a piece of crap. Let me tell you. He wants to enforce mask mandates, especially for ones who are already been vaccinated. And to me, that's not right. And the St.
Yeah,
Louis,
I get you.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say I get you. So why are so many people in Missouri like fighting back against getting vaccinated? Why are they pushing back so hard in your state?
Well, some of the reasons is that they don't want to deal with the vaccines. They know the risks what the vaccines are, and they don't want to be told what the government tells them to do. We just don't like being controlled by the government.
Okay. I mean, you guys aren't afraid of getting sick, clearly?
No, not at all.
Yeah, tough. Missouri people are tough.
Oh, yes.
You must have some good genes out there in the Midwest.
Oh, yes, absolutely,
It's all that beer you're drinking. It keeps all the heebie-jeebies away.
Oh, absolutely. And I've already been vaccinated. So, and not vaccinated by the hospital, but also been vaccinated by the good Lord up in heaven.
Okay.